Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, The New Realities of Risk Management. I'm Donato Calace, Director of Innovation at Datamaran. I'm very happy to be the moderator of today's webinar on the new realities of risk management, a topic that is very close to the research I carried out during my PhD in ESG and corporate sustainability. Before we kick off the conversation and we introduce the panelists, let me do some quick housekeeping. So as you can see from the agenda today, after this short introduction, we will start soon with the panelists' presentations. And after that, there will be a Q&A session. Then we will wrap up the conversation highlighting the key takeaways. The participants are mute only for audio quality purposes, but we will be very happy to hear from the audience. And that's why there will be 3 polls during the webinar, and you are welcome to provide questions in the chat box, and we will address these questions in the Q&A section. So first of all, before we kick off the conversation, I'd like to give a special thanks to our panelists for today. First, Anthony Balabriga, Head of Responsible Business at BBVA, former President of IRSE, Spanish Association of CSR Professional, and former President of Spain, SIF, Spanish Forum for Social Responsible Investment. Hello, Tony.
Hello. Hello, Danny. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for being here.
Great.
Then Sandy Nassing, Managing Director of Corporate Sustainability at American Electric Power. Among other things, she leads AFP participation in the Electric Power Research Institute and the Energy Sustainable Interest Group, serving as co-chair of its voluntary reporting working group. She was chair of the ESG in 2013. Hello, Sandy.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And then, unfortunately, Mr. Uday Gupta from Mahindra couldn't join us today, but we have Rane Ramchanda, Associate VP of Marketing and Supply Chain at Mahindra. He has more than 25 years of total experience in the field of manufacturing and marketing, and has been working with Mahindra for 14 years. He was leading the business excellence cell for 3 years and working on sustainability, ethics and governance, and total quality management implementation. Hello, Rane. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Rane from Mahindra Sanyo, Indian time.
All right. Then last but not absolutely not least, our own Maeva Devian, our Director of Client Success. Hello, Maeva. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for everyone on the call for joining the webinar.
All right. So next step, introducing what we will talk about today. So as you know, the theme of the webinar is the new realities of risk management. So why are we talking about new realities? The elements that are determining corporate survival, which are risks and excellence opportunities, are changing because of shifts in the economic system, what is usually called the fourth industrial revolution. It's important to note how this is not something that is happening in the distant future, but it's happening now. These new market realities are bringing social governance, environmental issues, what is traditionally addressed as ESG, in the forefront of corporate and investor decision making. Just consider how the discussion has evolved around non-financial aspects in the last years. It started to be niche and voluntary. Now it's mainstream and mandatory. This webinar will give voice to corporate leaders that are taking a proactive approach to embracing these new realities. we will learn about their approaches to integrating ESG issues and leveraging technology and big data analytics like Datamaran to do so. So before passing the word to them, let's see what are the guiding question for today. So the guiding question are what types of risk do ESG issues present and how do these differ from traditional risks? What are key elements of success for integrating ESG issues into enterprise risk management processes? And how can technology and data analytics help with mitigating risks and seizing opportunities at an early stage? So before asking our panelists to answer to these questions, let's have a question from for our audience. This is our first poll. Is your organization company currently integrating ESG issues into your risk management process? So we will give you some time, just a matter of 10 seconds, 20 seconds to answer this poll. Okay, we see results coming in. Great. So as we see, most of our audience today is working on integrating ESG issues into risk management, which makes our webinar very on the point in this case. And on this really interesting result, I would like to pass the word to our first panelist, Anthony Balabriga from BBVA.
Thank you very much, Danny. It's a great pleasure and honor to share here our own journey integrating this non-financial risk in our overall risk framework. So let me share with you first who we are. BBVA is a global bank with more than 70 million customers, 130,000 employees in 33 countries in Latin America, Spain, also in US in the Sun Belt, and also in Turkey. So we are a global bank that we are living a very deep process of transformation because digitalization, obviously. Our purpose is to bring the edge of opportunity to everyone. And let's say that our mission as leading this team of responsible business is to challenge the whole organization to ensure that we place people in all decision process in a systematic way. So that's our role within the bank. And that's what we are going to share in part today. Okay, so next slide. Well, as you said in the introduction, we are living a new context, completely different. That's the message we have shared with our leadership and our board of directors, that environmental social issues are gaining relevance. So there is a radical change on materiality of these issues. And not only because we have a renewed global agenda, but also because there is a market trend. And also there is more investors asking, which is our performance, our approach to this social and environmental challenge that we have as society and the commitment that we have as companies. Let me give you an example. Just 2 weeks ago, we received a letter from Share Action, a UK think tank, and also asset owners representing $1.8 trillion, asking to 60 CEOs of 60 big banks to implement the recommendations approved by the Financial Stability Board on climate change. So this is a good example that investors are asking and requesting the companies, and specifically to the financial sector. And finally, the regulation and self-regulation is growing and growing. And well, we have to adapt as soon as possible, because some are self-regulation, but at the end of the day, it will become mandatory in a few years. So what to do in front of this challenge? So next slide. Yes, this is the slide that we shared on the last report I had to the board of directors. We have been playing that role as second line of defense within the bank, and I report 3 times a year to the board of directors. And this was and also to the leadership, the question we put on the table. What we can do as a human group to improve our world, so and deliver our purpose in a transcendent way and very impactful way, And this is the challenge that we have as a company. And so we have a huge responsibility to integrate this and to manage risk and opportunities linked to social and environmental issues. The response that we propose to have is to have a new environmental social framework for the bank. Let's say a new narrative to explain why we are doing and what we are doing and how. A focus on business opportunities, but also a focus on risk management. Is a key strategic project for the bank, totally aligned to our purpose, aligned also to specific priorities that we have at a strategic level, aligned to our values as a company, and obviously integrated in the CSR policy that we have approved at the board level. So let me say, next slide, please. Which are the two areas where we are working in and how we are moving forward. So on the left, you have what we are doing in terms of integrating this emerging risk into our overall risk management framework. So we have, in fact, two speeds, one regarding environmental social risk, another one regarding reputational risks. So an environmental social risk, we are having in place specific processes to identify and assess the climate-related risk and also the social risk as well. We also are having a specific process to manage those climate-related risks and also social risks as well. We are integrating those into our overall risk management. We are also working on to define the different scenarios together with a group of banks that are piloting the new recommendations proposed by the FSB, the Financial Stability Board. Those recommendations that were announced in July on the G20 meeting in Germany regarding the TCFD recommendations. So we are going to participate with other 13 banks in an initiative led by UNEP-FI to implement those recommendations, because it's something that the investors are starting to ask. And scenarios is a key topic on that. Also, integrating metrics, and although today we still see not a regulatory pressure in terms of integrating climate risk or social risk into our risk appetite or in our calculation of capital requirements, it is clear that it will come soon. European Commission has launched a specific group of experts to work on that. So we see that these topics will become mandatory in 2 or 3 years. Regarding reputational risk, we have another speed. We have already in place a 3 lines defense robust model. So we have already integrated reputational risk in our ICAP analysis. So we have defined how much capital do we need for reputational risk. And we have a formal role as reputational risk specialist. So this is growing. And the second line, the second area is about business opportunities. Only say that we work very closely with the wholesale team to define an ambitious sustainable finance commitment for 2025. We expect to make it public in December. And also we are working very closely with all the teams on business development and retail to develop different solutions from this challenge in terms of opportunities. At the end, the most important to conclude is that the key success factor is to have the right governance, to have the board's oversight of these topics, and that this has to be part of the CEO agenda. And that helps a lot to make things moving. And that's all for the moment, and we comment later for Q&A. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tony, for your intervention. And please, Sandy, you can speak now.
Okay, terrific. And good morning from Columbus, Ohio, in the United States. And I lead corporate sustainability for American Electric Power. And we are one of the largest electric utilities in the United States, with 7 operating companies in 11 states, more than 5.4 million customers. We also are a rather large fossil fuel consumer, with 47% of our generating capacity coming from coal and 27% from natural gas. But the key story here is the transformation that's underway, both in our company and in our industry. Can you go to the next slide? And also go forward 2 slides, actually. So this transformation that's underway, this shift to a clean energy future, we've already reduced carbon emissions 56% since 2000, and that trajectory continues as we increase renewable energy, technology changes that are making the grid more efficient. But as this transformation progresses, and it's not just happening at our company, it's in our industry, regulations and public policies are also changing. Technologies are rapidly changing as well. And that requires us to be more flexible so that we can take advantage of the opportunities before us, but also manage the risks associated with these changes. It means we need a business model that can flex to this changing environment. Investors and customers are increasingly asking us how we're evolving and what that future looks like. And one way that we can show them what that looks like is through data. So that's an important piece for us in managing our risk. And because of our carbon footprint, we do have a considerable amount of risk. Next slide, please. It's pretty clear that companies that do understand ESG and integrate it into their enterprise risk management processes, as we heard from the previous speaker, have a competitive advantage. There's no question about it. They're constantly scanning the environment to identify those risks and opportunities, and it allows for us to be proactive in our engagement. We have had a lot of interest in ESG, a lot from our investors, but it's also coming from customers, which is a new stakeholder for us in terms of sustainability engagement. And they're asking questions about our environmental performance. They're asking about our safety and health performance. And investors clearly are also very interested in governance, because good governance and how you manage these things also matters a lot. At AEP, we're using Datamaran as one of our tools so that we can scan the environment on a regular basis. I believe that we're moving towards a time of real-time reporting. That's how quickly things are changing, and how instantaneous the expectation is that we're going to provide information on what we're doing and how we're where we're going. And so having that data is power, really, puts it in your hands, fundamental to showing your stakeholders that you are doing what you say you're doing. And what we have found at AEP is that ESG is also helping to drive innovation. So for the very first time this year, we launched our first corporate-wide innovation challenge. And the idea was to get employees to bring forward innovative ideas that could potentially develop into new products and services for customers, but also provide new revenue for the company. And we have a team of AEP leaders and industry experts who selected the finalists, and there are financial compensation associated with that, but it's a really great way to engage your employees in understanding the risks. And for us, the risk is reduced demand of electricity. It's the technology changes. It's what customer expectations are. And so this is really helping to drive us in that direction. Next slide, please. So talk a little bit about the risk. For us, it clearly comes from the investor side. I've been at AEP for about 12 years now, and for the first 10 years, I had about 1 to 2 sustainability-related inquiries from investors every year, usually on environmental performance or political contributions, lobbying activities. But in 2015, 2016, that really ramped up and really began to focus on ESG as a whole, not just the E part of it. And we went from 1 to 2 per year to 13. And 9 of those 13 represented more than $500 million in investment in our company. And while climate remains the primary issue, of concern, we're seeing a lot more of these other social issues begin to emerge. But it's through proactive engagement that we were able to get 0 shareholder resolutions, because that's a brand and a reputation risk that we're not willing to take. We tell our investors, we tell all of our stakeholders, you have a question, you want to talk about something, we're here to discuss it with you. So that transparency and that engagement really make a difference with respect to managing activism and also protecting and enhancing your reputation. For us, divestiture was the undertone of those engagements, and so there was a lot at stake for us to be able to do that. And we continue those conversations. Those are not going to diminish in any way. In fact, those conversations continue from the ones we started back in 2015. So proactive engagement and transparency and understanding that risk the ESG is risk, and data is one of the tools to manage that. So I'll stop there and take your questions later on.
Thank you, Sandy. That was a great contribution. And I will pass the word now to Rane from Mahindra.
Okay, I'll first give a background of what we are. Basically, we are into sustainable existence for more than 50 years by now. We are into alloy and special steel long products, that is bars and billets and bearing races. And we are into a B2B kind of scenario and supplying steel to various sectors of industries like auto, bearing, engineering. And we are probably a tier 2 or tier 3 supplier to all OEMs. And we are selling into a highly competitive and capacity excess market situation that makes our life highly turbulent. We are always exposed to all vulnerabilities of commodity prices, foreign exchange, fast changing customer expectations, etc. And a company would successfully remain into a long existence probably because of its intangible assets. If you go to the next slide, please. The next one. So we feel that, it is said that 80% of the market cap of many leading organizations is because of the intangible assets. We call it as non-financials or non-price value propositions like customer satisfaction, supply chain resilience, skill and competencies of employees, intellectual properties and patents, etc. And the new on the horizon are the reputation, capital, trust, stewardship of natural resources, and so on. So ESG parameters are becoming more dominant into day-to-day business, and many companies today provide evidence that taking care of ESG takes care of their success in the market, and how those risks are converted into opportunities to stay ahead of competition. Let's see our own example of Mahindras in the next slide, please. So while we started our formal sustainability journey, when I say formal, because Mahindras carry a rich tradition of good core values, which have made us successful in spite of turbulent market in last 50 years. Formal journey started and we decided that in front of multiple stakeholders, let us choose prime 3 stakeholders called customers, suppliers, and community. Identify the risks involved in these value chains, and is there a scope to convert them into opportunities by interacting, collaborating with them. And so the various projects which we initiated with our customers not only helped us keeping the customers locked in spite of a very low market, but it helped us in improving the share of business also. So these projects with customers were not only metallurgical, but they were non-metallurgical also. Like they could be collaborations in terms of environmental or social kind of joint projects with our customers. And on the metallurgy side, yes, the product responsibility or redesigning the product or innovating new processes to ultimately improve and take customer satisfaction to customer delight. And that's a challenge in an engineering industry like us. But we feel that this has helped us. Similarly, then on our supply side, we started with a formal supply chain policy, then the code of conduct. We started bringing suppliers together. We regularly have a collaborative approach with them. the supply chain meets, and we try to impress upon the ESG, and especially also in the suppliers who are smaller in nature or they are not organized. We try to take them along with us and sensitize them on ESG parameters. And this definitely helps us during the turbulent times. Again, the suppliers stick to us with that belief that the association with Mahindras anyway is much beyond the regular supplies, or it is beyond profit, what we call it as planet and people. And on the community, yes, we started interacting a lot with the in and around communities, and we tried to have improvement in the local skill. And then the problem in India is probably the trade unions or the politicians which try to influence the trade unions. The interaction with communities helped us to ensure that there is no tool down or work disruption in last 10 years. We believe that these are the benefits of started focusing on the ESG parameters. Next slide, please. Let's understand how exactly we are doing it in Mahindras Annual. The balance scorecard traditionally has got 4 pillars, but for more than 5 years now, we are at the top management level tracking the 5th pillar in the balance scorecard called ESG. And it is extremely articulated in terms of the measurements and deployed to the second in command of the managing director. And then there are, I would say, 2 divisions to handle ESG. One is the risk management, which is driven by the CFO, and then the sustainability kind of journey driven by a cell called business excellence, both of which report to the managing director. And the risk scorecard keeps tracking the risks and take care of those risks into the medium to long term strategy. And it has got a linkage ultimately to the balance scorecard. And while the business excellence cell runs the a very structured sustainable approach, like we have got 16 cross-functional teams across the shop floor working on environment, social, and enablers kind of different topics. And we have got a 5 years rolling roadmap, which keeps changing every year. And out of which the 2 years is a very clear targets, and next 3 years is tentative targets. We also have PHAG goals as a company, and these feedbacks of sustainability in terms of people, planet, the 16 teams, the feedback gets ultimately into our balance scorecard and enterprise ERM. Data analytics, while we are doing all this, plays an extremely important role, because while you want to handle so much of a widespread value chain or multiple stakeholder wide canvas, I think data analytics like Datamaran plays a very important role. On the supply chain side, we are tracking the data of our suppliers through SOFI, or the latest one is a resustain for our entire ESG data. And the dynamic risks are probably tracked using the Datamaran, which we are using since 2014, because we have a larger materiality and stakeholder group. And no doubt, on a regular interval basis, maybe even quarterly, the feedbacks from the stakeholders get into our risk scorecard or the sustainability roadmap, and ultimately they drive the balance scorecard, the 5th pillar called ESG. And no doubt, while we do all this, continuous communication to the internal as well as external stakeholders is extremely important. So we have got multiple facets of communication, like maybe the sustain. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so if you see on the right side, we report, we are reporting for our sustainability for last more than 4 years. We do CDP reporting. Then we have got internal sustainability flyers, which go to our website and customers and suppliers. Datamaran keeps helping us for managing the data, which in turn goes to the 16 aspect teams of environment, social, and governance. And it gets attached to the risk scorecard and helps us to improve the balance scorecard targets. The next slide, please. This is the last slide. While I was trying to ask our managing director that, okay, at the CEO level, what do you see or what are your risks really? I mean, in today's time. So after 2008, the business scenario changed so much that he said, now I've got technology challenges. Then one has to look into various funds available, because for a industry to drive any project, you need funds, and standalone it will be difficult. So keep tracking the funds availability. Disruption is highly a challenge. For example, in steel making, people are talking some 3D modeling, and the way in which we make steel might get completely changed. Innovation is going to drive our business model. We have to keep a track of competition, and the regulatory changes are pretty rapid to our surprise. And if you look at this entire canvas, I think a regular update through a very formal kind of data management is the solution to handle so many issues on the long-term horizon, because he is the person who sets the long-term vision or has got a telescopic lens in front of him in this turbulent scenario. And we feel that from 2008, in last 7 to 8 years, we laid a strong foundation for our future, purely adopting the ESG kind of approach. This is what we would like to submit now quickly. I hope I made it in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rane. And before introducing our last panelists, our second call for today, do you feel that your company has the tools in place to effectively address and monitor ESG-related risk and opportunities? After viewing what the companies where our panelists are working on, I think it's interesting to see our audience is doing in relation to monitoring ESG, non-financial risk and opportunities. So the panel is on. We will soon see the results on the screen. So it's interesting how half of the audience today thinks that there are no proper tools in their companies set to monitor ESG risks. And on that results, I leave the stage to my colleague, Meva.
Thank you, Donato, for that. And thank you for everyone for answering the poll. That's really interesting to look at, also considering how we're working with our clients to use Datamaran to actually support risk management. So that's what I'm going to talk about right now. And actually kind of the context of that with this new realities that we've been talking about during this webinar. We also wanted to mention the new COSO framework that was published about 2 weeks ago. So that's really a sign that things are changing and evolving, and the standards also need to evolve as well. If you know also the ISO 31000 framework, so there's a new update that is also expected in 2018. So, it's also, again, reinforcing that idea that a lot of things are evolving with technology, and that risk frameworks need also to be adapted to that. So next slide, please. So as we've seen that the COSO framework was recently launched, we just wanted to remind a few of the trends that they've identified, and that also quite align quite well with that webinar that we're doing today. So if we look at the first trend, we are seeing that companies need to deal with more and more data. So it is, harder and longer to take into account all the pieces of information that are available out there, with more and more data being generated, and not only quantitative data, but also qualitative. So actually about 90% of data that is generated globally are unstructured data. So anything that is basically not, that you can put in an Excel document, for example. So all these texts, from corporate reports to tweets, all this information that are valuable, but that are, that are very difficult to analyze manually, or it's a very tedious exercise to do so. Now, using technology and included artificial intelligence and automation to do it really allows to optimize that process and do that more efficiently. And that's also what we're aiming to do with Datamaran and with our clients using the platform. So what we also see is that it helps with managing the costs of risk management. So by reducing the amount of time you spend, collecting and analyzing the data. So using technology, you can really go beyond that and do things more quickly, but also, spend more times on things that bring more value by, letting the hard work of, collecting and automating the analysis to the machine, and then you can really use that to inform your strategy in a more efficient way. So all that in turn helps also build stronger organizations. So if we look at the next slide, basically what we wanted to show is that you can see the framework of the COSO risk framework on the right-hand side. So you can see that there's several components that are included in that framework. And we just wanted to show how that aligns as well with the different risk analysis capabilities that Datamaran offers. So if we start with the third component of the COSO framework, which is assessing the performance. So we can see that risk identification and risk assessment using Datamaran can really support that step in the framework. So if we talk about risk identification, for example, you can use that to really, screen the competitive, regulatory, media, and social media environments to identify new risk and really, get the pulse of what's going on and be sure that you're up to date on new risks that might emerge. So that's really the component that Datamaran can help with. And then also from a risk assessment standpoint, if you look at likelihood and severity, you can also use Datamaran to follow historical evolution and coverage by peers, for example, of certain risk. But also using the regulatory database, you can also have the legal consequences that are associated to diverse topics. So it really allows you to give extra information to your risk analysis and provide kind of data-driven information that really allows you to back up your analysis. Now, if we're looking at the next point, so risk mitigation and risk monitoring, those two are really related to the review and revision components. So in terms of risk mitigation, the idea is to use Datamaran to identify practices. So once you've identified your risk, how you can deal with those risks and what are the mitigation strategies that exist and how you can either just, implement them into your own organization or adapt them based on what you can observe of what is done in the industry. And then in terms of risk monitoring, it's that ability to use Datamaran to track and monitor on a daily basis, if you want, those risks by using the different databases that we have to understand how those risks evolve over time and tracking that on a continuous basis. If we look at the last component, information, communication, and reporting, and Datamaran capabilities also include risk communications in terms of graphs and visualizations that you can download on the platform. So it also helps you, support that process of of communicating about those risks. So if we continue with the next slide, I just wanted to just briefly give you an example of the risk identification step, for example, where you can see that the spider graph can be used to identify competitive risks. So you can, using Datamaran, you can really easily identify what are the gaps between your company and your peers or your whole sector if you want, by analyzing the level of emphasis that your company puts on a certain topics versus your peers. So to identify where you might be lagging. So that's an example of how it can be used. And also, if we look at the graph that is at the bottom of the page, it's coming from the news module. So it allows you to identify the trends over either a company, but you can also track, for example, topics, and you can also see, for example, the legal highlights that are related to those topics. So it can also inform you on reputational risk. So those are some examples of what you can do. There are many other ways that Datamaran can help. So don't hesitate to reach out if you want to learn more. But just to finish today, if we're going to the next slide, sorry, I just wanted to conclude and share a few quotes from our clients on the benefits of data-driven approach. Sorry. And that's, clearly shows that it can allow you to save time thanks to the automated analysis, and it also helps build the business case for certain issues. So sometimes, the rationale may not always be visible to the naked eye, so that's something that you can do with Datamaran. And finally, it also strengthens the link between financial and the financial and non-financial value of companies by analyzing the qualitative information that is behind the numbers. So it's also really useful from that point, and allows you to really refine your approach. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Meva, and thank you for to all panelists for their contribution today. Now it's time to open the discussion to our audience Q&A. While the presentations were going, we received a number of questions which I tried to summarize around 2 key points, because it seems that we have 2 key points that are driving the curiosity of our audience. So I will summarize these points, and then I think we can have a round of answers from the panelists following the same order that we had for the presentation. So that would be Tony, Sandy, and then Rene and Meva. So the 2 main points that our audience is asking about is one, on the nature of these emerging risk areas. So how urgent are these risks, like reputational risks, talent risk, diversity risk, and what are the impacts on strategy and decision making? And the second big point of discussion within our audience is about integration. So how can these points, these issues be integrated into strategy, and especially internally speaking, how it is possible to engage the board? What kind of data and analysis is needed for that purpose? So, Tony, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you very much. Interesting. Well, I would say that the impact in strategy and decision making is growing, at least on the financial industry. For instance, climate change. We have to recognize that a few years ago, this was not under the table of the regulator and investors, and they were focused only on the reputational aspect. Today, climate change is seen as a huge challenge with a key in financial impact, in terms of risk, physical risk, transition risk, and also opportunities to create new solutions. So today, I would say that the most important banks in the world, and also at BBVA, we are having these discussions not as a parallel conversation, but as a part of the strategic agenda. And secondly, regarding the integration, the point is that you have leadership and to your board why is so relevant for the value creation of the company on a short term, but also the medium and long term. And the most powerful drivers for us have been the investors' pressure and the pressure also from this soft regulation that is appearing. And they start to see that this has not only impact on reputational, but on financial as well. I would say that that's the most critical data to show the relevance.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on with Sandy.
Okay, so if I understood your question, what the impact is to strategy, and then how it's being integrated. And clearly, to my counterpart's point, climate is certainly the biggest issue for us as well, and is integrated within both the enterprise risk management processes, but also within our strategic planning. And our board is very much engaged on ESG issues. In fact, I go before them formally and officially twice a year, and we have these conversations, but they have those on a regular basis throughout the course of the year. And they want to know how we are addressing those issues, not only as a company, but as an industry. And it is, investors and customers who are putting the pressure on us. We are looking at, and we align all of our work on sustainability with enterprise risk management and with our corporate goals and objectives and strategies. So we're currently in the process of developing new sustainability goals for AEP, and we are ensuring that they're in alignment with risk and also with the corporate strategy and goals. But then we're mapping everything to the SDGs to show, the impact that we have more globally. So, hopefully that answers the question. How we're impacting and integrating those things within our strategy.
Thank you, Sandy. Ranem, your turn.
Yes, I would like to give an example. I said that we are supplying steel to, let's say, 50% of our steel goes to the auto sector. Now, what is happening on the environment front in terms of emissions. The petrol and diesel and gas cars are getting switched into, let's say, electric cars. Now, in our strategy, this is a direct environmental impact, because if we are selling 50% steel to auto sector and bearing sector in turn, which supplies to auto. So in our strategy, we need to recognize this change in the industry that is taking place. And in that case, is our business going to get affected? If yes, how much? And then what's the risk involved, and what is the mitigation that we should be doing? Then are we supposed to expand some into the new businesses like solar, wind energy, so that our steel in that case, auto getting into a risk zone, and these sectors getting into an opportunity zone. So your question is very appropriate, one. And second, while we talk of these impacts onto strategy, the data is extremely important, because to our own C-suite or top management leaders or board, our judgment about the business or competition or the latest technology updates and innovation that's happening will get convinced only if there are if there is a data to prove. Then people start believing, and so the data management in such highly turbulent time is extremely important, in my opinion, if I have answered you rightly.
Thank you, Rane. All right, then it's Maiva's turn.
In terms of how urgent this approach is, and how we need to integrate ESG into risk management. I think that we're seeing more and more clients as well, getting back to us and saying, we need to start taking that into consideration. We don't necessarily have the tools to do it. So I think it's something that we see emerging more and more, and with different initiatives that we see also at the international level, like the TCFD. I think those are the things that are also pushing in that direction. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you for again to all panelists for the contribution to the round of questions that we receive from the audience. Of course, we are receiving many more questions, but the time, of course, it's not helping us. So we should move on with our webinar and introduce the last poll of the day. And the last poll regards technology, and in particular, how can new technology and data analytics that support the enterprise risk management process, which is a question very much related to what the audience was already asking during the Q&A session. So it would be interesting to also listen to their opinion. So the poll is launched now, and we will keep it open for the next few seconds, so you can give your answers, and we will see soon what are the results. Of course, some of these processes are very much related one to the other, but of course, depending on the different positions in the company, also the different key processes will be valued in a different way. Okay, so now we see the results of the poll, and interestingly enough, basically technology confirms to be a key element in the integration of non-financial issues into risk management, as all the elements of a risk assessment and a risk management process are impacted by the role of technology. With this result, I think we can move on to the final considerations of today's webinar. So, as few takeaways that, of course, are a bit narrow to summarize the conversation we had today and the key points highlighted by the panelists, but still are the four elements that more or less summarize everything that it has been highlighted today. So first, ESG issues are, of course, an opportunity in terms of business innovation and excellence. So they're not only a source of risk, but when leveraged on in the right way, can be, and early on especially, can be an opportunity for additional competitive advantage. Of course, this is possible only when there's a continuous monitoring of the external landscape. We have seen also in the discussion how fast these issues change, and how urgent is also the impact they have on key business operations. That, of course, continuous monitoring can be enabled only by two elements, which are the next two points in our takeaways. The first one is effective integration, which requires cross-department engagement. We have seen how our panelists today were telling stories of breaking down the silos of their departments and cooperating across the departments and responding directly to the board. In this sense, non-financial issues are no more siloed or isolated within the company, but they start to be an integrated part of the core business and core decision-making processes. And finally, the ultimate requirement for that to happen is that the data coming and telling us the story around these issues should be robust and auditable. So the insights should be based on evidence and data-driven rather than based on opinions or managerial judgment only. And technology in this sense is giving a great contribution as our latest poll confirmed. This wraps up our conversation, and thank you for everybody for participating, especially thank you to our panelists, and thank you for sharing the practices, the best practices, and the next projects that will happen in your companies in the next month. And let's keep in touch on the evolution of this exciting area and the future challenges that revolve around environmental, social, and governance topics. I will send you via the chat the links to get in touch with us and get our materiality assessment guide, our global insight report, and connect for our next events. Thank you.